Good morning, everyone. So, Mrs. Gore here to talk about chapter 5 and 6 of Night, which you should have read. So, chapter 5 is a really big chapter because we open up and Ellie is very angry at God and he's blaming God for all the despair around him. It is Rosh Hashanah, the last day of the year, so New Year's Eve. And so all the Jews gather to pray, and the whole time he's just thinking about how angry he is at God, how disappointed he is, how this is all God's doing, so he doesn't understand why they're praying to him. The next day is Yom Kippur, the first day of the year, and they generally fast. But Ellie's dad tells him no, and Ellie doesn't really fight him on that because he's struggling so much with his faith. So he does not fast for the first time ever for him. And he says they're given a gift by the SS. They have selection for the new year. So as we've seen before, they have to strip their clothes and they have to run as fast as they can to prove that they are not weak and that they are useful. So Dr. Mangle comes to each block, has them strip, run past him, and then he writes down the numbers of those who he thinks are fit for the crematoria. Yossi and Tibby tell Ellie that his number wasn't written down. He's running really fast, but he's not sure about his dad because they're not in the same block, so they're not going through this process together. Unfortunately, when he meets with his dad later, he doesn't think his number is taken down, and he finds out that it was. So Ellie and his dad have this really heartbreaking goodbye. Ellie's dad gives him a knife and a spoon as his inheritance in case he is chosen for selection. They do a second round, a second test of the numbers they've written down. And once again, Ellie can't be there, so they say goodbye. He gets the inheritance. Thankfully, Ellie's dad passes the second time, so he's not chosen for selection, and Ellie is able to return the knife and the spoon to his father. Unfortunately, though, Akiba Drummer, who we've heard from throughout, he was a very faithful man. He is passed. He was taken for selection because of how frail and weak he was. But I like to point this out because we were just saying how, that first page of chapter 5, he's blaming God, he's angry at God. But on page 77, when Akiba the drummer is taken, he says if only he would have kept his faith in God. And I think a lot of times we read this and we think, what is going on, Elie Wiesel? But hopefully this shows you what a big conflict he's having with his faith and his identity. He wants to rebel against God because he's angry at God. And I think that's common, but this is an extreme anger, right? He's watching people he loves perish and die and be abused. That's a huge anger. But this moment with Akiba the drummer, when he says, if only he would have kept his faith in God, it shows us that Elie is still a faithful person. His faith is wavering and it's crumbling in certain areas, but he still is a man of God. So, winter is now here. Like we said, it's the new year, so it's cold, the snow is coming. And Elie has some issues with his foot, so he has to go to the infirmary. And they decide they have to operate on his foot. He has a pus ball on the heel of his foot, so he can't walk very well. So they operate. And he's resting in the infirmary when they find out they're going to evacuate the camps. The Russian front is getting close. They can hear them coming, and they know that they need to get out of there. The doctor tells Elie he can have his dad come to the infirmary, and they will stay there. They will not be evacuated. But everyone in the infirmary tells Elie that means they're going to be taken to selection. So Elie and his dad decide that they're going to leave, even though Ellie's foot still needs like another 2 weeks of healing. He wraps it in a blanket, and we end chapter 5 with their block being dismissed to march on out, and they are going to do all of this traveling via foot. These death marches were really common, and a lot of people made it through all these years in the concentration camp, and a lot of people, unfortunately, did die during these death marches. One last thing, though, before they can evacuate, they make them clean the bunks, and they say, let people know you lived as men, not as pigs. And even though we know this is all done by the Nazi Party. This affects the Jewish people, and they do. They go and they clean the blocks, and they get everything clean, and then they start to march out, and that's where we end on chapter 5.